It's the Total War leak of the week. Serving it up as we speak. Bah!
The last video wasn't really covering anything too major, but I'm pleased to see that Scarbrand's making it in along with Oxyotl. So I'm not trying to make some sort of schedule, but it's been a week and I swear I have something new for you. So what makes this one kind of unique to me is the first one, I sort of thought it could be fake. The second one I was pretty confident it was real, but it was kind of mundane. This one sort of toes the line and made me flip from fake to real. Thus, this video. I don't know if you're sick of disclaimers and cop-outs or if you're sick of these leaks, but I just want to say beforehand that the content I'm going to be delving into today is upcoming DLC, so even if I am correct, it could be subject to change. And secondly, that this could be my first L. This one could be fake, but without further ado, let's go down the twisted tale of the Beastmen DLC leak. The story begins when my close associate and notorious CA dumpster diver, I'm kidding, that's a joke, Mr. Marvelous, aka Boris Toadbringer on the Total War Discord, brought to my attention a new leak, a purported roster leak for the Beastmen. So what it shows is a bunch of Beastmen unit cards. I guess you could call it the Beastmen unit card leak, and if you're like me and him, when we first saw this image, the cards look really authentic. They look like the existing artwork in the game, but the numbers at the top just look completely wrong. Like they look photoshopped or something. So there it sat, abandoned, unloved for a few days, until he brought up to me that it could actually not be fake. Buckle up, bud, this is the investigative journalism of a lifetime. So those numbers at the top, although they are strange looking, they're actually not unfamiliar to every Total War Warhammer 2 player, because they actually look identical to the numbers in the Chinese version of the game. And you may be thinking, I can see the resemblance, but
you're lying to me.
What those numbers at the top actually are the values if you were to go into a multiplayer lobby or a custom battle. That's their point value. So if you look at a Chinese player who happens to be picking his army in one of those modes, look, he's picking some lizards. So yeah, it was just the Cathayan number set looking extremely jank. Okay, so if this could be real, what are these things? As of right now, the two legendary lords for the DLC have been announced, but the roster itself hasn't. From what I understand, the original posting of this image was by a Chinese user, so I'm not exactly sure what the circumstances were and why the Lizardman portion of the roster hasn't been leaked, or even if that might surface later, which really suck, huh, because I'm making this. Also, as of this image, the leak does not contain any new hero or lord types. This is also completely unconfirmed, but I also heard that the poster of this image claimed that in the update that will accompany this DLC, the FLC Legendary Lord will be a dwarf, which is interesting. As I don't have access to the original post, I wouldn't take this claim very seriously. The Beastmen themselves are a bit of an obscure faction. On the campaign, they don't exactly have a stellar representation, but from what I understand in multiplayer, they're not half bad. They rely on speed and primal unconventional tactics, which usually puts them at odds with the mechanic of this game, as they don't wear a ton of armor and have a lot of leadership. It's very clear that the unit second to the left is a Centaur with throwing axes. Quite fittingly, a Regiment of Renown variant, something that currently doesn't exist for their roster. To the right would be the Jabberslythe. I'd say a fan favorite Beastmen request at this point. It is a horrific flying monster that terrorizes its enemies into madness, which damages them, and also bleeds acid. Although whether or not all of these features will translate into Total War Warhammer obviously remains to be seen. It could be a very powerful unit for them, as they don't exactly have a super heavy flying monster yet. To the right of that is the Gorgon. It's kind of hard for me as someone who's not a super huge Beastman fan to understand what these guys do. They're four-armed colossal beastmen that can apparently mend their own wounds by eating flesh. If their ability to Wolverine regenerate is as powerful as the fluff suggests, it could be a really powerful addition to the roster. It's also a gigantic monster with frenzy, which could make it a bit of a terror in melee combat, but keep in mind that they may charge without orders, and probably wear little to no clothing or armor, which would make them extremely vulnerable to missile attacks. I think this might be one of the biggest glass cannons in the game. And as to the two cards on the right, it looks like they're ROR versions. So if you're wondering why I didn't cover the card on the far left, I kind of want to explain something about this leak. Unlike the Kislev leak, there's nothing in-game here, it's just their unit cards with their point cost, presumably for custom battle. Well, the thing is, since these are Warhammer 2 units, we can actually cross-reference those costs with the pre-existing units and the Beastmen and other factions' rosters. Now, I just want to say before I get into this, that if these numbers are correct, since this DLC isn't out until next month, they could change within that time frame, and also the balance of the units can change. So please don't take these as gospel. So the unit on the far left, it looks like some sort of chariot boar unit, and if you're familiar with the Razor Gores that already exist in this game, it's not exactly the same as that card, but extremely similar. And at 750 points, we can, I think, pretty accurately deduce that those are Tuskgore chariots. Beastmen are sometimes referred to as a chariot faction, as I understand, in the tabletop. The Tuskgores are sort of the common to the Razor Gore's uncommon. They're more your garden variety, bloodthirsty, mutated boar, pulling a chariot full of drunken animal people. Like a lot of the Beastmen's roster, they can actually hit quite brutally if they manage to connect. That's where the issue lies, getting them safely within striking distance. So all around, could be a pretty good unit. They're a bit more spammable than the Razor Gores, which come in at 1000. This kind of lines up with their stats on the tabletop, and it remains to be seen if Beastmen will be seen as more of a chariot faction after whatever rework they could possibly have. Personally, as an unexperienced Beastmen player, when I come to face them, the unit I fear most is the Cygore. At 1600 points, this unit is a gigantic, rock-lobbing, monocular, living artillery piece, which really leaves you to question how it has such good depth perception. Although not the best melee kaiju in the game, it is probably one of the only artillery pieces that can actively hold its own in a melee fight and even push enemies to scream and flee in terror. I bring this up because coming in at 1700 points is the Jabberslythe, and at 2000 points the Gorgon. While flying units I can imagine would be more expensive due to the added mobility, which is something that the Beastmen actually value greatly, it leads you to believe that they will both be stronger than the Cygore, which to me I think is pretty important. The closest thing I could find to the Jabberslythe was the Frostworm, which actually cost 1700. I was able to find that Frostworms can easily beat an all Cygore spam army. Although it wasn't a super scientific test, I think it kind of demonstrates what the Jabberslythe will do. It will be a flying unit, possibly with some sort of aura and a ranged attack. It sticks out its needle-like tongue and tongue something. If the Kislevites have bear tick, then I guess you could say that the Beastmen have licky tongue. Oh god. The price is 2000, which makes it one of the most expensive things in their roster. I mean, even if these numbers aren't super accurate, it's crazy expensive for the Beastmen standards. It's hard to get some of their legendary lords up to 2000. The only thing I can imagine is it's going to have some sort of great attack, special abilities, or perhaps be something that the Beastmen have that's truly unkillable. A lot of the Beastmen's roster sort of comes across as squishy, like even the Minotaurs. If you were to look at them, yes, they are rather bulky, but they're glass cannons. They will die. Seeing how powerful ranged units can be in Warhammer 2, I think something that could soak up that damage and then heal it back would be a boon for the Beastmen. But it certainly piqued my interest, and seeing as the Beastmen are sometimes called the worst faction in this game, I'm really curious to see what the upcoming DLC and potential updates could have for them. If anything new happens, I'll be sure to make a video on it as soon as possible. Stay tuned for more amazing content.